South Africa has a serious crime problem. And from a conservative perspective, you cannot let crime be so pervasive in your country, because at that point, you don't even have a country anymore. All you have is a lawless place, and that's not a country.
A normal day in a security van carrying cash in South Africa. What happens next looks extraordinary. But it's a constant criminal threat. This is a cash-in-transit robbery. Vans rammed off busy roads. Guards terrorised. Bombs used to access cash. CIT hijackings are one of the violent crimes at crisis levels here. This guard survived a robbery, some don't.
As a human being, I'm scared that I'm going out. I might not come back, but it's life for everyone in CIT.
The crime stats have become so alarmingly high that they don't even surprise people anymore. South Africa consistently ranks amongst the highest crime-ridden places on the planet Earth, with things like high levels of murder, aggravated robbery, and other violent offenses. We have seen our society break down in law and order. There is a perceived erosion of respect for the rule of law and authority that contributes to a widespread criminality. The crime in South Africa has become so pervasive that our criminal justice system has become ineffective in itself. The system is plagued with inefficiencies, backlogs, and low conviction rates, which fails to deter offenders from committing crimes. If your docket can get lost for a couple of R100, what stops you from committing crimes? If you can park a stolen car at a police station, what stops you from committing crimes? If you can buy guns from police stations and from police officers, what stops you from committing crimes? Organized syndicates are out of control in South Africa, and they're entrenched deeply with their networks of driving various illicit activities from drug trafficking, kidnappings, and hijackings. As if that wasn't enough, you add on to that the porous borders, which have inadequate control, which allows the entry of illegal people, illegal firearms, drugs, and of course individuals who are involved in all sorts of cross-border criminal enterprises. Corruption in state institutions is at high levels, particularly within law enforcement itself and the justice system, which undermines all efforts to combat crime. A lack of visible policing has been a problem in South Africa for many, many years, which means an insufficient police presence in many communities, especially in high crime areas, leaving citizens feeling vulnerable and unprotected. When you have an informal settlement with hundreds of shacks and the whole community is arranged in a disordered way already, it is very difficult to police, leading to people committing crimes at will, making them high crime areas, but then you have no visible policing because they're so difficult to police. It's one of those crime vicious circles of which there are many in South Africa. For many years, we've complained about poor policing training and poor police discipline. Of course, this is regarding professional conduct by police officers. How many times have you seen a police officer in broad daylight breaking the law themselves, whether it's a traffic cop, speaking on the phone while driving, or police officer driving in an illegal manner or speeding down the road, and of course the many videos in South Africa of policemen drunk in public.
Your gun is falling off. Please take that firearm away before we all get shot by accident. There's alcohol in the vehicle as well.
Okay, don't worry, I'll find her.
There's alcohol in his vehicle as well.
The professional conduct of South African police officers leaves much to be desired. We have a problem with training and the internal discipline of some of the elements within the South African police service. Illegal firearms proliferate the country. The widespread availability of illegal firearms just adds to violent crime and allows people to take up crime, because when you have a gun, you have power over people, making robberies and assaults more lethal and more prevalent. South African criminal offenders commit crimes with impunity due to a low likelihood of arrest, successful prosecution, and meaningful sentences. Rural safety is of course a concern, with farm attacks, most of which affect black farmers, and there is no genocide. That is a lie. And of course it affects white farmers as well. No one wants farmers dying on farms. And one of the reasons crime is so high, it's because they are a soft target. They are all the way out there by themselves, and it would take police often hours to get to someone in a township or in a suburb. How much more someone on a farm? Farm attacks and murders are a significant threat to the agricultural sector and rural communities, impacting food security and stability. Of course they are, but the lie that there is a genocide is a lie pushed by people who are cloaking themselves in patriotism while being quite directly racist. They call themselves patriots, like Rob Hatsoff, who says he loves this country but would gladly lie about his so-called countrymen to the rest of the world as long as they're not white. That is not patriotism, and I do not justify liars like that. If you want to go after our country, go after us for the truth. Because if a South African gets killed, whether black, white, Indian, colored, or otherwise, it is a travesty, and all manner of people have been the victims of terrible, terrifying, and evil crimes in this country. No one needs to lie about it to gain their own advantage or for racist reasons. There's high rates of interpersonal violence in South Africa as well. A significant portion of violent crime stems from interpersonal disputes, such as relationships, often fueled by substance abuse as well. One of the things that you can see that leads to this sort of interpersonal violence is public drinking and how much it has gone up in South Africa nowadays. You often see people drinking in public. What do you think happens once that person has guzzled down 2 bottles of beer and gets home? They either fall asleep or they start trouble. And of course, if there's anything nearing a genocide in this country, it's that of our children and men actually. But it's always more vivid when it's the children, because a society that can't protect its children cannot really protect anyone. Children are disproportionately affected by violence, often as victims of abuse, neglect, and of course caught in the crossfire, such as that of gang members and gang wars. The economic costs of crime continue to stack up. The direct and indirect economic burden of crime, including security expenses and loss of investment, hampers the national development of South Africa. There's an erosion of property rights, with high rates of property crime, including housebreaking, theft, and hijacking, undermining citizens' sense of security and ownership, and causing a lot of people to want to immigrate. I do not begrudge anyone for wanting to immigrate, because when you're living in constant danger in a chaotic and dysfunctional country, where your children seem to have no future, believe me, everyone wants to immigrate. There's a decline in public trust in law enforcement, a lack of trust in the police and judicial system, of course, because it doesn't serve the public and discourages reporting of crimes and corruption, because you think to yourself, well, I've just had my phone stolen. What's the point of reporting this? The only reason people report things is either to be able to claim from insurance, or they need it on paper somehow to carry out some secondary process. You don't report things because you think it'll be solved. A lot of the time, dealing with the police is just as frustrating and traumatic as being a victim of crime. There's a perception that the judiciary is also lenient, that the judiciary is overly lenient in sentencing, failing to provide what would be an adequate deterrence and retribution so that justice is performed. Our South African justice is definitely not blind and does not treat everyone equally. It also dishes out sentences that might be too lenient on people who have committed horrific crimes, and often takes a long time to carry out the judgments. This weakens the moral fabric of a country. You can see it all around. The country is morally in decay and is depressed. There is a breakdown of traditional societal and moral values, and this can be seen as contributing to the increased criminal behavior, because dysfunctional families with a weak moral fiber create people who become criminals. If you're raising children mainly through single mothers, that has been proven all over the world to be the #1 way to create people who will be in jail joining gangs and committing crimes. There's a lack of personal responsibility in this country, a culture where individuals are not consistently held accountable for their actions and their choices, especially criminal types. And the crime situation has had an impact on foreign investment in tourism. The high crime rate negatively affects South Africa's international image, deteriorating investment and tourism. People get robbed and murdered on Table Mountain. That is not a way to invite people to South Africa. Yes, we want South Africa to be alive with possibilities, not that possibility. Become a member of the channel and get exclusive members-only content, courses, articles, audio, and much more, all in one place. We add new materials every single month, and we'd love to have you. Check out the links in the description or in the links for the channel. A conservative government made up of millennials would tackle crime in South Africa by advocating for solutions centered on strong governance, individual accountability, and robust law enforcement. A conservative government would look to strengthen law enforcement. There would be no way around it. Conservatives believe in law and order. There'd be a significant increase in the number of police officers, ensuring adequate resources, training, and equipment for effective policing and sorting out logistics. There would be no 1 hour, 2 hour waits for the police to respond to the scene of a crime or to some circumstance. There should be zero tolerance policing. That means a strict broken windows approach, aggressively prosecuting all crimes, even minor ones, to prevent escalation. There should be mandatory minimum sentencing, enforcing mandatory minimum sentences for violent and repeat offenders to ensure the severest of consequences. We need to prioritize intelligence-led policing, invest heavily in crime intelligence units to proactively identify, track, and dismantle organized crime syndicates. South Africa needs to enhance our border security, obviously. Secure national borders with increased personnel, technology, and stricter controls to curb the flow of illegal goods and individuals. In other words, our policy at the border should be soldiers in position, dogs on the prowl, and guns out. We need to combat corruption vigorously in South Africa, starting with the Zondo report. Let's see whose name is in there and go after them. Implement stringent anti-corruption measures within the SAPS, even if you have to take the whole organization, break it down, and restart it. It's not just the policing that's a problem in the SAPS. The forensics are a problem. The intelligence is a problem. The admin is a problem, and so on and so forth. The National Prosecuting Authority also needs to be restructured and torn apart. And correctional services, same. And we need to build more prisons instead of trying to cram more criminals into the prisons we've got, with severe penalties for offenders, and I would say bring back the death penalty. Without a doubt, the death penalty is righteous. If you are a certain kind of criminal, you have forfeited your right to live. Your life has become forfeit. We do not take your life. You do not deserve it. You forfeit that life. If you kidnapped and murdered children, death penalty. Visible and proactive policing obviously has to be in place. The police number has to work, and it has to be one number all across the country. If you dial 10-111, you should find an operator. They should be able to converse with you, react to what you're saying by dispatching the help you need. Increase police visibility through regular patrols, roadblocks, and community engagement to deter criminals and build trust. Every street in South Africa should have at least 2 police officers walking up and down that street at least once a day. Police should be walking, and there should be police cars patrolling, and there should be roadblocks in certain areas where if a crime is committed, such as a cash and transit heist, you cannot actually escape the grid of policing that is using drones, foot police, police on motorbikes, police in cars, that sort of thing, where we can lock down areas in South Africa if we need to. There should be police walking the street at least once a day down your road. We need to improve police training and discipline, overhauling police training to bring it up to the standard of this century, to instill discipline, professionalism, and effective policing techniques with swift action against misconduct. Even the way police stations are set up should change. There should be an administrative side and a policing side. When you walk in, the person that takes your statement and writes things should be part of the admin squad and not just the police who also 5 minutes ago was witnessing a shooting or investigating a crime where a child was kidnapped and saw a dead body. Then 5 minutes later, he's taking down your statement and could care less.
We do not care.
We need to disarm criminals, implementing aggressive campaigns to confiscate illegal firearms and tighten regulations against illegal firearm use. However, the average citizen should be able to get a firearm reasonably easily if they are law-abiding citizens. Allow South Africans more gun rights so that each South African, if they wanted to be, as long as they are law-abiding, should be armed. Gun training in South Africa, if you ask me, should be mandatory for all people. We should look to make the judicial process more efficient. Justice delayed is actually justice denied. We need to streamline the court system and create more courts for specific crimes. We need to reduce case backlogs and ensure swift, decisive justice from arrest to conviction and sentencing. Protecting rural communities obviously needs to be a priority that you could use the military for. Establishing specialized rural units and making sure they function properly could be one alternative. Increasing patrols in farm areas, using technology as well, and stationing satellite police stations around rural areas. And I repeat again, it's not just white farmers that are dying out there. Actually, most of the people that die out there are black farmers and black farm workers. So stop pushing the lie of genocide. It is repugnant and it is hateful towards your country and your countrymen. If you want to be a racist and push that lie, just say so. Don't clothe yourself as a patriot and doing it on behalf of your country and your countrymen. Just say you hate the blacks over there and you want to push lies. I don't want any South African who's living in a rural area dying in some horrible way by these filthy criminals we have running around in this country. Because I am not a liar and I do love my country and my countrymen of all types. We need to address substance abuse, obviously, because substance abuse, the Nyaupe boys, are criminals. Substance abuse drives criminality. They become thieves, skilled thieves at that. And these people do not sleep, these Nyaupe takers. So all night they're out here committing crimes. We need to implement some laws against drug and alcohol abuse, but also take on new and creative ways to try and deal with it. I would say move all of them out into the desert, into the Northern Cape, on a farm for rehab. If you are a drug taker in any community, you get moved out of that community and you have to reintegrate by first going out to the farm, doing your rehab and reintegrating slowly. That's a whole discussion on its own. We need to protect vulnerable populations by enforcing laws, by rebuilding the moral fabric of our society. The first way you do it, of course, is by enforcing laws and public policing and that sort of thing. But you need to get rid of social grants and rebuild your family. Because with social grants, what you have is dysfunctional families led by low-quality women. What you need is fathers back in the house, not the government as your father. We need to deal with our dangerous offenders. Ensure that violent and career criminals are incarcerated for extended periods in very well-functioning prisons that actually do have a rehabilitation aspect to it and are just not giant farms of learning how to do crime. The way we do prisons in South Africa has to change. It needs to be a balance, and I'm not going to get into it completely because it needs its own video. It needs to be a balance of two approaches, the Scandinavian model and the Japanese model. It doesn't need to be what we have in South Africa today, which is just a factory for getting men raped, others into homosexual activities, and of course teaching all the people that are in there how to be better criminals, more ruthless murderers, and then releasing them into the general public. We need to reinforce property rights, enact and enforce strong laws protecting property, protecting private property, making theft and damage to property a high priority for law enforcement. You need to restore public confidence, demonstrate consistent and effective action against crime to rebuild public trust in the police and the justice system. We need victim-centric justice, prioritize the rights and needs of victims throughout the criminal justice process, ensuring support, restitution, and a voice in the proceedings. We need to promote moral regeneration, initiatives that foster personal responsibility, ethical conduct, and respect for law and order within communities, often through faith-based and community organizations, and of course, indoctrinating our children into a certain moral right from school level. Hold individuals accountable, emphasize personal responsibility for criminal acts, moving away from explanations that diminish individual responsibility, like, oh my goodness, I grew up poor. And then, of course, there needs to be a deterrence through certainty of punishment. We need to focus on making consequences of criminal acts certain and immediate, rather than solely on the severity of the punishment. We need a country that respects the law, that upholds law and order. South Africa needs to deal with its crime through personal responsibility, bring back the death penalty, reform your prison system, change how you do policing, and for goodness sake, rebuild the morality of your society. Subscribe to the channel or Cyril Ramaphosa will be president forever.
Magwala, cheche, Hoya Rona,
Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description.